What was life like for you growing up? I heard that you were a member of 9 in your family, so 8 brothers and sisters. How was that like?
Oh, man, it was pretty good. You know, it wasn't crazy and, like, hectic because, you know, all my sisters and brothers are older than me. Well, there's only one brother that I have that's younger than me, but everybody else is, like, much older than me. So it was pretty good. I guess I got to be the spoiled kid.
That's always good.
Yeah, so it wasn't bad at all.
Growing up with 8 siblings, like, how did you stand out? What was something you did around the house? Like, what would they say you were known for?
I guess I'm not sure. I guess me being younger, and I was into more different things than I guess, you know, most of my family. You know, I was always into, like, you know, skateboarding, listening to, like, heavy metal when I was young. So I remember my mom, the first time you familiar with, like, metal bands?
Yeah.
A little bit? Okay, well, I bought Slipknot's first CD.
Okay, yeah, no, I know your mom was like, what?
I think I was in middle school, and then my mom called my dad and was like, you listen to devil music? And so I used to listen to music, like metal in the shower, like just turn it up and then take a shower. So, yeah. So I guess I was kind of the first of the bunch to start listening to things like that. And
you're into different stuff. What made you start playing sports? Like, what sports did you start off with? What were you into growing up?
Well, the first sport was, I did karate when I was much younger, and that didn't turn out good. So, when I always wanted to play football. You know, all my buddies played football, and all my buddies played, like, Top Warner and, you know, All-American and that type of, like, micro league and all that type of stuff. But my dad was really protective of me, and my dad kind of acted like my mom, and my mom acted like my dad, so he didn't, like, he really sign off on, like, me playing, you know, football pads on, so he had me, like, flag football. And then from flag, I went straight to high school, and then I stuck to high school football because, you know, I was trying to spin, thinking everybody trying to grab my flag, and, you know, just crack, all my buddies were just cracking me, you know what I mean, so that didn't turn out too good. And then, let's see, with the karate, you know, I did karate for a while. I did it for a couple of years. And at the time, when I was doing karate, my parents were divorced, so I used to go to my dad's house for the summer. And then, but anyway, before it all down, I got into my first fight. I think I was doing karate for I don't know how long. And I just got beat. I got beat up trying to see out somebody. So I gave that up completely.
So what made you get into combat sports? Like, how do you go from getting beat up over the summer to wanting to compete in MMA? Like, how did that transition work?
You know, I did a little bit of boxing, but like I told you, you know, my dad never wanted to sign off in amateur boxing. You know, your parents have to sign your license so you can, you know, fight and, like, you know, fight the show and get your little amateur license. So he would never sign off. So, you know, I was pretty much just like a gym rat for a while. You know what I mean? So I was off and on like that. And then I did football, and I just didn't like that. I don't want to sound like selfish, but I just didn't really like team sports like that after football. You know, it was like, I looked at it like, you know, you can be winning. Well, we were winning sometimes, you know, and then all of a sudden maybe 2 people, you know, kind of slack off, and then, you know, we lose the game because, you know, 2 people out of, 11 people, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I just didn't like that part of the aspect. So anyway, so I went to, you know, kept doing boxing for a little bit, and then when I got old enough to fight, you know, but without my dad having signed, I boxed. Yeah, I did a tournament, my first tournament, and won that. And I was at, I believe that was heavyweight. Yeah, it was heavyweight. I did a boxing tournament, and then from there, I was just too short. I was like 5'10", heavyweight, and the guys that were in the boxing tournaments were kind of like almost. They're not. I'm not gonna say the pro, but their height was set for pro heavyweights. They were like 6'3", 6'4". They're big guys. So after that, I started dabbling into like jiu-jitsu a little bit there, and then I got into kickboxing and fell in love with it. And then went from there and started fighting amateur and the pro and to here now.
When did you know that you could make MMA into a career? When did you have that fight? When did that light turn on where you say, man, I'm good at this. This is what I'm going to do?
I would say because I lived in California my whole life, and then once when I decided to pursue MMA and really fight amateur, there's no amateur leagues out in California at the time. So I got the decision to move to Kentucky for a year, just for a straight year, and they had a sanction commission out there and everything. So I moved out there for just 1 year to fight amateur and then moved back. So I would say maybe my fifth fight, that was something that I was like, man, maybe I can really make something out of this.
Definitely. What did people in your family say about you wanting to become a pro fighter, especially MMA? Because, not too many black athletes had the avenue into going into MMA. It was kind of unseen. When you told people that's what you were going to do, how did they react?
Yeah, it's really hard in the beginning because it's like it's not as new as it was. It was only a couple years. Like, it's crazy how MMA is evolving year by year because when I was fighting amateur, it was only in 2010. So it's like when I tell my family, they're just like, "What? What is that?" You know what I mean? It's not like if I told them like, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna fight professional boxing," they're like, "Oh, okay." But MMA was still not. It was broad. It was mainstream, but it wasn't that mainstream. You know what I mean? So when I tell people in my family, they're just like, "What? What is that? Like, you gonna make any money doing that stuff?" Like, those guys just try to kill each other. It was just so hard to explain.
Yeah.
But, it was hard because, nobody, they wanted me to do what I wanted to do, but they just didn't understand it. And just like any parents, if it's something that they don't really know of, they don't really think that maybe, you can make a career out of it.
Definitely. Before we, move on and talk about, your pro career, when was it that your dad turned around on you fighting? How was that conversation between you and him? Obviously, you don't need him to sign off on anything, but when you decide to fight as a pro in MMA, how did that conversation go?
He still didn't understand. Tell you the truth, he's a lot better than what he used to be, but he just kind of started coming around. Yeah, I would say once I started fighting on TV, then he was like, "Oh, okay." Maybe when you hear commentators talk about me and things like that, then he kind of starts coming around like, "Oh, I guess he is, making something of himself." So he's just like any parent, he wanted me to go to school and, get a degree and just anything that I can take care of myself with.
No, definitely. I can understand that. And it's a good thing that he did come around because you had an amazing start to your MMA career, 13-0, all the way through your Strikeforce days. Explain to me how that was like just piling up the wins and getting notoriety. And your 13th win came over Robbie Lawler, who we see is doing great right now. So explain to me how it was during that winning streak and really making a name for yourself.
It was crazy, man. It was like, it was just like, I don't know, I guess type of like surreal, You know what I mean? It didn't really register with me, I would say, because it's just like, you know, going from just watching it to, you know, fighting and then being on TV and then you know, fighting people that you've seen on TV. You know what I mean? When you weren't even thinking about MMA, it's things like that. It's just, you know, it's crazy as far as, you know, in my eyes.
Definitely.
So a lot of it, man, what's surreal was just like, you know, like, am I really here? You know what I mean? It's like, or just scrolling through TV, you know, when you're not fighting, and then seeing when you fight, you know, I don't know, it's still crazy to me.
And now that you're in the UFC, I mean, obviously that happens even more than ever. What was the transition like? What was the difference between Strikeforce and UFC, and how did you handle that?
You know, I think the big difference is, to me, would be the crowd. You know what I mean? Because my first fight with Strikeforce was the first, you know, takeover fight. So, you know, all the first people that I met, you know what I mean, were people that I still see today. So it wasn't too much of a big difference because, you know, I don't know how it was ran before UFC bought it. You know what I mean? So I was just there when, you know, UFC already took it over. So I would say just the crowd, man. The crowds are crazy, you know. And the crowds in Strikeforce are crazy, but it's more people now. You know what I mean? The crowds are a lot bigger and more into it, and that, yeah, there's more into it.
Coming into the UFC now, your record, you stand at 1-3, but you know one of those fights are one of the most debated fights in the UFC in the past couple of years. So that one, let's throw that out the window. But obviously, has been a transition. You started off 13-0, now you're 1-3. The UFC sees something in you because obviously you're still there. What's that transition like? What has been different over this past year and a couple of your losses that you're going to change moving forward?
You know, I think a lot of it is just with me just thinking, you know, like maybe letting the whole UFC thing like get to me, like, you know, like I used to fight, man. And some people, you know, just didn't really believe me, but I fight because I love the fight. You know what I mean? I just enjoy it. I don't know what I'll be doing, you know, but I'll be trying to get my fights in the street, you know, and not because, you know, I'm a bad person. I just really enjoy fighting. You know what I mean? And I think when I was in Strikeforce, you know, I really just didn't care. You know what I mean? I just fought because, you know, I like to fight. I wasn't thinking about winning. I was just thinking about, you know, beating my guy up, you know, and everything coming after that. You know, and I kind of felt like when I got to UFC, I was just thinking, like, you know, I have to win. You know, I have to win. And, you know, I was doing things, you know, just to win. Instead of just, you know, just going back to the carefree, you know, just getting in there fighting. And, you know, I think that's how I perform the best, you know, when I'm just going in there having fun and just another night of fighting instead of, you know, thinking about all the stuff to come, you know, after I win. You know, I have to win and this and that.
Yeah, that happens to a lot of fighters. I mean, I've talked to a lot of guys, especially guys who come off of like the Ultimate Fighter shows and all that stuff, and they really tell me about that change. Like, they don't know when it changes, but there's a definite change when you start fighting in the UFC, and it takes a while to adjust to it. So, yeah, they all kind of say that happens. Moving forward, you know, you were scheduled for UFC 176. It has now been postponed, but pretty much canceled. All of the fights have been dispersed. You're scheduled to fight now at 177. How does that change affect you?
Doesn't really change that much. You know, I got the same guy. It sucks because, you know, this would have been the closest I've ever got to fight, you know, to my hometown. And, you know, I don't know if you know about now, but I hate running and playing. I tried to talk them into letting me get on a train to my fight. So I hate flying. So this would have been the first fight I didn't have to fly in. You know, I was so jazzed about it, but you know, maybe it was too good to be true.
You can always take the drive.
You know, Sacramento's not that far.
Yeah,
so.
You can always take the drive. Go up there early and just take it. It's only, 6 hours? It's not bad.
Yeah, I hate drives, too. Maybe I'm just a difficult guy, because Vegas is too far. I'm just like,
I make that drive all the time. It's such an easy 4 hours, man. It's such an easy 4 hours. It's better than the flight. Flying, like, from Vegas to L.A., the turbulence, man, if you don't like flying, it'll get you.
That's the flight that changed everything for me, because I flew to Kentucky, you know what I mean, before, and it's been bad, but not that bad. The one that changed my life for the worse was Ontario to Vegas.
Yeah, the turbulence will scare someone if you don't like flying. Like, it's so quick, but it's all rocky the entire time.
Yeah.
Like, the lights will go off sometimes. It's a horrible flight.
Oh, yeah.
So, you know, all right, so it moves back a month. Is there anything as far as, you know, you maintaining weight that you might, you know, have to change up? You're fighting at 185, so is that like your natural weight? Like you'll be good to move it back 3-4 weeks? Or is there something you actively have to train for to keep your weight down?
No. My weight hasn't really been a factor, you know. The more times I fight at 185, you know, my body's even more adjusted to it, so that's not a problem. If anything, it just gives me more time to train.
It's always a good thing. Would you ever consider dropping down to 170? We talked about you fighting Robbie Lawler before, and his record at 170 is night and day compared to his record at 185. And we've seen that in a lot of divisions, these guys who walk around at, you know, 205 cutting to 185. Like Chris Weidman or John Jones, who walks around at 260 cutting to 205. And it gives them a noticeable advantage when you carry that strength down with you. Is that something you consider, like dropping to 170?
I haven't really considered my camp start talking to me about it, so I don't know. Maybe we'll see after this fight. But I haven't really given too much thought, but everybody around me is telling me all their thoughts about it.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I'd figure, you beat Robbie Lawler, and the guy almost just won the title. It kind of seems like, man, you look at it and be like, that is a definite title possibility, like, really quick. Because I know I can, I can dominate at that level. It's just so hard for a lot of guys to cut that weight and, maintain that energy and that activity.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's definitely interesting. It's great to know that, you guys are ahead of the curve and kind of thinking about it. Heading into this fight, what do you have to do to pull out the win, though? Like, what is your game plan going in? What do you just want to see from yourself, not having anything to do with your opponent? What do you have to do personally to head into this fight and feel like, okay, I'm going to win it?
Yeah, just going there like I used to, man. Just carefree, man. I just go in there and fight, and do what I love to do, and I'm not thinking about the win. I'm not thinking about the loss. I'm just thinking about getting in there and being able to fight, and then, everything else to come. I just feel like if I go there, with the spearhead and how I used to, I'll do just fine.